Hey everybody, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about the so-called OSI model, which is extremely fundamental for understanding networking in general. It's an absolute must to understand what OSI means, how it functions, what the relationship is between its different layers. Um, if you will be doing anything even remotely related to networking, okay? So we're not gonna go into crazy much detail about each one of the layers, but we are gonna explain them in enough detail for you to be able to understand them correctly. Okay. So first of all, OSI stands for Open Systems Interconnection, and it was developed by the ISO organization, right? By the International Organization for Standardization, which is a good mnemonic. OSI is developed by ISO, so it's easy to for you to remember that. Now, OSI is a conceptual model, which means that it um, it's abstract, right? So um, its purpose is for you to understand how um, the process that it describes is happening, right? So initially, a lot of people are having a hard time understanding what it's actually describing because they're they're thinking of what it describes in two specific terms, right? They're thinking that it's something so tangible that the OSI literally just puts a label, just puts some labels on top of it, and that's it. And this is why they're basically looking for something that's not there to begin with. So we'll see what this means in a moment. But for now, just understand that OSI has 7 different layers, and you absolutely have to remember each and every one of them. Initially, it might be a bit difficult, but there are different mnemonics out there which can help you do that. One of my personal favorites is please do not throw salami pizza away, which is for remembering the layers from the bottom up. And by the way, the layers are numbered starting from the physical layer all the way up to the application layer. So please do not throw salami pizza away. We'll help you remember the names by using the first letter of each one of the layers. Of course, there are other ones that you could use. Whatever works for you, right? You don't even have to use a mnemonic because at some point you're just gonna know all of these by heart anyway. But at least initially, it might be helpful to do something like that. Okay, so um, when let's say there's a there's somebody sending something to someone else, right? Maybe I'm somebody who is sending an email to somebody I know. So using the OSI model, we could literally see how the information that I'm sending is traversing each one of these layers and basically how the information is traveling until it reaches the destination. So um, first of all, when I'm sending something, the whatever I'm sending is traversing the OSI model from the bottom, sorry, from the top down, right? So if I'm sending an email, this means that maybe I'm interacting with an email client, for example. So everything starts at the application layer, which is the layer that's closest to the user. This is how the user is interacting with the OSI model, basically. In this case, it's by entering the email into the email client. And then the moment you hit send, this information is traveling down the OSI model all the way down to the physical layer. And then On the other end, on the receiving end, it's doing the reverse thing, right? It's traversing from the physical layer all the way up to the application layer. This might not make too much sense right now, but hopefully it will in a moment. So let's first start. So let's start describing each one of the layers so that it can make more sense, right? But just before we do that, make sure you remember two key terms. The first term is encapsulation, and the second term is the encapsulation, right? Encapsulation is basically the process of a packet traveling down the OSI model. So each one of the layers, it's it receives an additional header in order for the packet to be correctly received on the other end, on the receiving end, right? So this process is called encapsulation when when the packet is going in that direction. On the receiving end, the reverse process, the encapsulation, is basically the stripping of these headers as the packet is going up to the application layer. So remember these terms, remember what they mean, and we're not going to go in crazy detail about how it actually works. At least we're not going to do it today, right? And then we're going to focus just on what the function of each one of the layers is, right? But just remember these two terms. These two terms, because we are gonna get back to them at some point. Okay, so let's first start with the physical layer. The physical layer is pretty straightforward. So you probably know that whenever we are sending some information over a network, there's always a medium that the information is traveling through, right? So for example, let's say that I am sitting at home and I'm using my home network in order to connect to the internet. So if my home network is so if the medium is copper, if there are copper cables that I'm using, then this means that on the physical layer, the information would traverse through copper cables. If it's optic, then it would be an optic cable. If it's wireless, if it's Wi-Fi, then it would be the waves that the information is traveling through. But the point is that on the physical layer, it's the information is traversing either as electric signals or as white signals or as wireless waves, depending on what the medium is. So this is why I'm saying that it's one of the OSI layers that are relatively straightforward. Okay. So let's now move on to the data link layer. On the data link layer, so here is, for example, where the switching happens. So most of the switches, and you already know what a switch is, right? It's a networking device that usually has a lot of ports, and the switching process usually happens on that a particular layer. Now, there are two sub-layers here that you need to be aware of. One is called a MAC, or Media Access Control, and the other one is called LLC, or Logical Link Control. And you're probably already familiar with MAC because you already know what a MAC address is, right? A MAC address is the physical address of a device that usually each device that's connected to a network has. For example, your computer right now probably has a MAC address on its wireless card if you're using wireless, or even your phone, right? Your mobile phone also has MAC address that you could hook up and see what it is. So these two sublayers are the sublayers of the data link layer. Now, next you have the network layer, and on the network layer is where routing usually happens. This is where you have the routing protocols that we're going to talk about later in more detail. For example, protocols like EIGRP or OSPF or IGMP and so on and so forth. All of this happens on the network layer. By the way, keep in mind that there are also so-called layer 3 switches. There are switches that could also do routing. So these switches could operate both on layer 2 and layer 3. Okay. Next, you have the transport layer, and with the transport layer, it's relatively easy to remember what's going on there, because there you have the TCP and UDP protocols, right? And you have the port numbers of the TCP and UDP protocols, because you could have a protocol. So every protocol that you can think of has a port number that it works on. So, for example, for the protocol DNS, the port number is 53, and it could work both on TCP and UDP. But on layer 4, it works on port 53, and this is how you can remember what the transport layer is about. It's all about the TCP and UDP communication. So next you have the so-called session layer, and usually people are having more difficulty understanding and comprehending the upper layers of the OSI model compared to the lower layers. But this is probably because it's a bit harder to explain what the upper layers are, and because of that, it's also harder to comprehend that. Right now, the session layer deals. It's exactly what the name says, right? It deals with the establishing and managing, the opening, the closing of a given session. So in general, it basically grabs information from the presentation layer, sends it down to the transport layer, and then it does the reverse thing on the other end. So, for example, full and half duplex communication is an example of something that's happening on the session layer. Okay, and then you have the so-called presentation layer. The presentation layer, generally, there are three main things that are associated with it. It's compression, encryption, and formatting. This is all happening on the presentation layer. Okay. So this would be your layer 6 of the OSI model, and then at the very top you have the so-called application layer. The application layer, as we said earlier, is the layer that's closest to the end user. Is the one closest to the person who is sending or receiving information over a network. And on this layer, you have protocols like DNS protocols, like SMTP protocols, like FTP or TFTP, working on the application layer, and it's all it's all communication that again on the sending side, the person is interacting with, let's say, an email client, and then on the receiving end, again, the receiver is interacting with an email client in order to receive the information. Okay. Now, there's another model that's called the TCP/IP model, and you need to remember how the layers of the TCP/IP model are. So, which the layers are, and how they're related to the layers of the OSI model, right? So here on the left, you see the TCP/IP layers, and on the right you see the OSI layers that we already talked about, right? Make sure you remember this correlation. So it's only 4 layers with TCP/IP. The first one, the network interface layer, it's actually combining the physical and data link layers from the OSI model. Then you have the so-called internet layer, which is the equivalent of the network layer over the OSI model. The transport layer, pretty straightforward because it has the same name as the transport layer of the OSI model. And then you have the so-called application layer, which basically combines the functions of the session, presentation, and application layers. Okay, thank you, and I'll talk to you in a bit.